Well, but J.C. Latham, Olu Fashanu, and probably Talise Fuanga, if you imported them into last year's draft class, they'd probably be tackle one.
Welcome in to the Hot Read Podcast for Friday, April the 5th. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, Director of Published Content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We're also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network. You can follow me on social media at Easton Freeze. I'm joined, as always, on this lovely Thursday afternoon by producer JT, who you can follow on social media at JT_Runke. JT, how are we doing?
I'm good, excited to be back here again on time, I should say. D-Good in the comments saying starting on time in this economy.
Easily the most on time we've ever been.
It's exciting.
It's 4:04 p.m. right now, which means we started the 5-minute countdown before 4 p.m., which
I was
may have
giddy
never
with
happened.
excitement.
Has it ever happened before? I
mean, I was pretty excited about it.
And do you know why it happened, JT?
Why?
Because I've decided to change my ways.
Okay.
No, I'm just going to the Preds game after this, so I'm on a.
Oh, okay.
I'm on the clock. Okay. That's literally why. We'll go back to our regular delinquency, I'm sure, as soon as this episode's over.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I'm just gonna get out of here in front of it and say I'm not taking any no comment at this time.
What's the record at this time?
0-5. No comment. No comment.
0-5. They've not won a game?
No comment at this time. I refuse to give a statement. I'm talking with my people. My people will get back to your people, and we will talk about it at a later date. But for right now, no comment. So that's all I have to say on that.
I need to go back. How many games in a row did they lose to end the year last year?
No comment. No comment.
What's the current active losing streak?
To the Houston Texans and how it is now an arms race, but in the AFC South. That's what.
Would you like to talk about that? That would interest you more than this conversation.
Let's talk about that. I would love to talk about that instead.
Okay, let's do that. I have one more side note, by the way, like completely unrelated to the Diggs thing, but I wanted to bring it up because I don't know if you noticed, like an hour ago, PFF, and we met the guy at PFF that sends out their social like clickbait, essentially, like the "who's stopping this team" graphics that are meant to drive engagement, and they do. And I don't know if you saw the Titans PFF Titans account put out a minute ago. Titans needs after draft needs after free agency. Tackle. Defensive line. Yep, sure. Tight end. You sure about that?
I mean, it's kind of a clutch layup to post that right now as we're about to talk about the top 10 tight ends of the NFL draft. I guess
we had our people call him and he hooked us up there. So we're like here's the more shocking thing, JT. Getting a lot of replies right now because I tweeted about it like why, huh? What? And I'm getting replies right now saying, I'm not crazy about either of our tight ends. Like Chig, one person called Chig Johnny, which is funny. But they're like, Chig, he just drops everything. And Josh Wiley's like, he didn't show anything. No one's saying the Titans couldn't use a better tight end. What I'm saying is they don't need one. Like these are supposed.
Yeah. I have thoughts about that. So
you do? Okay. So
I do.
Are you a man of the people on this? You think the Titans need?
No, but I would say to those people who think that they do actually need a tight end in this draft, I would say, sorry, you missed your chance. Last year was the year to get a good tight end. My bad. Sorry. You missed your chance.
Well, that's what's going to be the back half of our show today. We're actually doing two separate podcasts today. And with the live show, it's going to be one continuous show, but we'll have to let you sneak behind the curtain with us in between the two shows in the middle. We're going to kind of start over and you'll be here for that. So I need you to be a good studio audience and just clap when the clap sign comes on. Okay. That's going to be our top 10 tight ends episode, the back half of today's show. We'll spend about 30 minutes on it. We typically, if you are not new around here, if you were here last year, we do our top 10 positional draft series around this time. So for the next 3 weeks, we're going to be going through every single position on either side of the ball, talking about the top 10 players in the draft at each of them. And we are starting with tight ends today. They're usually their own episode, but with the tight end class this year, I don't know if you noticed, there are some good ones. There's one really good one and then some okay ones, and then largely a bunch of day 3 flyers. So we're not going to do a whole hour on that and bore you to death and bore ourselves to death. As Stoney in the comments saying, the tight ends class is cheeks. Yes, indeed it is. So we're essentially going to, we found a way to make it an interesting conversation and not a tiresome one. So we're going to do that for the back half of the show. The front half of the show, we're talking about Stephon Diggs to the Texans and late breaking development here, right as the show began, about what exactly that deal looks like, the construct of that deal now in Houston. We'll talk about that, as well as Ljarius Sneed. His contract details came out, so we'll share those, and that ended up being a very positive deal for the Titans. And then there is a pre-recorded segment on today's show, which I teased on Twitter earlier today. I hopped on a call with Mike Herndon, our friend Mike Herndon, here with the 440 Podcast Network, co-host of Football and Other F Words. He was too busy to join Stoney and Zach yesterday, so I scalped him today. I meant like a ticket, not like Inglourious Bastards. That's not what I'm referencing. I brought him over to our show for today, and we did about 18 minutes, him and I, talking about the cult of Joe Alt, how, and Zach put this very eloquently, people continue to line up and pray at the altar of Joe Alt, and they probably shouldn't, not because he's not a good prospect, but because of a lot of reasons. And Mike and I go through what those exactly are in that segment. That'll be about 15 minutes of our show in just a minute. Okay, so that's the roadmap for today. If you are with us live, we appreciate you being here. Do us a couple of favors. First of all, join the comment section over on YouTube. Go to Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page. Find this live stream there. That's Broadway Sports Media on YouTube. Join D Good and Stoney and Volcano and Glory Day Sports over there. By the way, shout out Glory Day Sports. I was on their show this morning at 7 a.m. I did make it to it. I woke up for it and did it, and I was not fully asleep the whole time. I hope I was all right. JT, I know JT told me he was going to wake up and be just jump into my spot if I didn't show, which was like a 50-50 shot, but I did show up this time. Mornings are not my thing. So shout out to those guys. Check out that episode when you get a chance, because I think it's a good one, because I'm on it. And you know what? I'm a little bit of a narcissist, I suppose. Okay. Diggs to the Texans, JT. We found out on... what's it been now? 2 days? Was it 2 days ago that we found out? Yesterday. Gosh, time flies this time of year. So yesterday we found out that Stephon Diggs, former Buffalo Bills wide receiver, headed to the Houston Texans. They made a trade that, and I'm pulling up the details here. So the Bills received a 2025 second round pick from the Texans. It was the pick that the Texans just got from Minnesota in a trade. So they get a next year second, and the Texans in return get Stephon Diggs, as well as a 6th round pick this year and a 5th round pick next year, which is the first place I want to start, JT. When we first heard that the deal had happened, we didn't know the terms of the deal. And it was like, whoa, how about the Texans continuing to be hyper aggressive, going all in on this rookie contract window that they have with CJ Stroud, establishing an offense of high-end talent with deep talent to try to contend in the AFC. And then those terms come out, and it's like, man, that, the Bills are clearly telling us what they think about Stephon Diggs based on that value. That's how it read to you, right?
I think so. It's kind of like them trying, like you said yesterday, get off of him a year early, which I can see. If you dive into some of the bigger numbers of Stephon Diggs' season last year, you kind of see how he lost a step, and where he lost that step was in the deep ball game. He was not as efficient as that big outside guy who was going to go up there and get the ball on the outside. And I think the guys over at Reception Perception made a great article today, which basically kind of laid out how I think Stephon Diggs will work in that Houston Texans offense and how he didn't really work in the Bills offense anymore. You saw a lot of success from Stephon Diggs throughout the entire season in kind of the short game for the Bills. And I think that's where he's going to thrive, with Tank Dell and Nico Collins being the guys who are going to go for the deep ball and be on the outside like that. Whereas when you put Stephon Diggs and have him in the middle of the field, that's where he's most efficient. Well, the Bills kind of have Khalil Shakir, Dalton Kincaid, and James Cook to take care of that. So really, was there a fit for Stephon Diggs anymore when he can't really be efficient on the outside? I'm not so sure anymore. And I think that was a big reason of why Brendan Beane made this deal. Now, for the compensation, I've really thought about this for a long time now.
A full 20 hours.
24 hours.
I mean,
but
you've really been mulling it over.
It's been on my mind for a long time. And I think I when you put it into perspective of what they got from him, even
Right.
if you want to call it a present value 3rd round pick.
I was about to say, because it's not really them getting a 2nd round pick. It's a future 2nd, which you could argue is a now 3rd in terms of value. Plus, they gave away a future 5th and a current, or no, a future 5th and a current 6th. So I don't know what the math is on that. It's like either a late 3rd, early 4th, ultimately in value they got back for Stephon Diggs. That's kind of nothing burger.
It really is nothing. But then again, you kind of look at the historical trades of wide receivers. Amari
True.
Cooper goes to
5th round.
the Cleveland Browns for a 5th round, and you can argue that he was starting to be in his prime. So getting off of an aging Stephon
Somebody
Diggs,
go trade for T. Higgins right now. You can get T. Higgins for a bag of chips. Go get him.
But I think that the big thing is the money, and obviously they were in some cap trouble and continue to be in some cap trouble. And so I think that giving up that 2nd, I think for both sides, you can kind of call both sides a loss after the contract the contract details came out today for the Houston Texans side, really. But then again, the Houston Texans are getting Stephon Diggs to be their de facto wide receiver 3. So I don't know how much
I think
call
the
that
Bills
a loss.
Right, that's fair, and I think the Bills. I think they think Diggs is cooked. Like they could be wrong. Maybe he's got more gas left in the tank. But the talking point, obviously, being, hey, the last 10 games of the year last year, that decline, pretty nasty. You know, he kind of fell off the face of the planet despite still having significant target share. A couple of things about this. A lot of folks in Tennessee seeing this move, it's like, wow, now look at the Bills. They now have, a bona fide wide receiver 1. I think some folks kind of showed their hands in this media market about not really knowing what the Texans wide receiver room looks like. Let me put you on to a man named Nico Collins, folks. He's 25 years old, and he had a better year last year than Stephon Diggs did, despite being in a worse situation, on a worse team, with a worse quarterback, with less targets, or less completions, at least. I'm assuming that is also less targets. I didn't look it up, but he had 114 more yards, Nico Collins did, than Stephon Diggs last year on 27 fewer receptions. They both had 8 touchdowns, and again, he's 5 years younger than Diggs. So I don't think anything has changed. As Stoney half jokingly put it on Twitter yesterday, and I commented saying I agree with this wholeheartedly. I think Diggs is kind of glorified Tank Dell insurance. He is the 2 over there, and if all goes well for Tank Dell, he may be like the 2A, 2B, or even the 3. And if Nico or Dell goes down, then he's again, don't get me wrong, fantastic veteran insurance in that regard. But Collins was the wide receiver 1 in Houston before that trade, and I'm almost certain he is the wide receiver 1 on that team still today. As for the Bills part, they didn't get a whole lot in return, but getting anything in return for a turning this season 31-year-old wide receiver, I'd say is a win. Clearly, they just didn't like each other either. Like, that part of it is real. It sounds like he was talking about a trade a couple weeks ago. Joe Mixon saying online that, hey, we've been talking about this, and then the trade happened. So I just think they got rid of kind of a bit of a cancer on their team, at least in that way. I don't think this really moves the needle much for the Texans, so much as it telegraphs to me they really are not just all in on this rookie contract window, but this year in particular. And that brings me to the point we found out just in the last hour or so, that part of this deal was the Texans erasing the years after this season that were on. Stephon Diggs recently signing a big money extension with the Buffalo Bills and then being traded. That extension cut down to just this upcoming season in 2024 by the Texans, who also accelerate some of his, they turn some of those years into a signing bonus now. And he gets paid extra this season. I think it takes him from 18 million a year ish this season up to 21, 22 million this year after that bonus that he just received. So that part of it makes it a much worse trade for the Texans, in my opinion. It's, you're trading what will probably be a future top 50 pick for 1 year of a routinely disgruntled Stephon Diggs coming off of the worst 10-game stretch of his career. That's choice, man. It's also worth noting, by the way, some very smart cap people, Arjun Menon and Daniel Salib and Nick Cordy, pointing out that the Texans can't receive a comp pick for him either now. I don't quite know how this works, JT, but because they cut off the end of his renegotiated the contract down, because of the rules, you can no longer receive a comp pick if Diggs walks in free agency because of that altered original agreement. So, man, I just do not know about this move for the Texans. to me, it telegraphs a little bit of overconfidence. I think it is a bit of a reach. Like they felt this seems to me like a move where in the building you're like, oh, like you're getting kind of power hungry, and you feel the momentum of your team building, and you're like, let's just add a little bit more. Let's fit a little, one more cherry on top. We can fit it in the bowl, and it looks nice on paper now, but a year from now you might be not feeling so good from that big plate of ice cream that you just had.
Well, let me put a question to you now. Do you think there's even more pressure on Bobby Slowick to perform now with another guy in the building?
Yes, of course there is. And you know what? I have ultimate faith in Bobby Slowick. We heard a lot of rumors at the end of last season about how like maybe not everybody in that building liked Bobby Slowick all that much. I don't know whether that's true or not, but the smoke was there. That's a lot of mouths to feed. And when the guy most likely, historically speaking, to be disgruntled and cause a media kerfuffle during the season is not the main guy.
To still be disgruntled after receiving 160 targets last year.
Right.
Like
he's not getting that in Houston. He's not getting close to that in Houston. Daniel in the comments saying Nico Collins going into a contract year must be furious about this. Diggs will eat into his targets. I mean, it's going to eat into his targets, and he might be furious, but that I think is part of the calculus for the Texans cutting off the deal next year. So they can, I think they did that in order to be able to choose Nico Collins as their future wide receiver 1 next season and be done with Stephon Diggs and his big contract. But still, man, it is, it's a move. It's an aggressive one. And I don't hate it for the Bills as much as right now. I really dislike it for the Texans. Now, if Stephon Diggs has a like median Stephon Diggs year, like take last year, the first 8 games where he was fantastic, and the last 10 games where he barely existed, find the middle ground there. And he adds that to this Texans roster for 14, 15 games this season, and they go into the playoffs and he's a contributing member. Maybe that's worth it. You know, and if you win a Super Bowl and he's a part of that, then it's certainly worth it. But man, if you do anything short of that, it's a blunder, a big one.
Yeah, I think so as well. And that's why I think for both of these teams, we're not going to see the real winner of this trade until a few other things happen. On that side, it's Stephon Diggs' production. On the Bills side, it's what they do at 28 or what they do in the draft. Because
you and I have debated this heavily.
We had a big debate yesterday, but I still think this rings true, especially now with the Titans. Obviously, at 28, there are wide receiver options, but is an Adonai Mitchell, a Keon Coleman, Xavier Legette type of player something that can replace wide receiver 1 production of Stephon Diggs? And I think that's an interesting question to
Well, you know what? Stephon Diggs was drafted in the 4th round, so just go get you a 4th round replacement, exactly. and he needs to turn into Stephon Diggs.
Exactly.
However, go draft Malik Washington, and he's your new guy.
Do you think that there, as it's talked about, the Titans could be possible trade partners with the Bills here as they go all the way up to 7? Your thoughts on that? And do you think there's even a remote possibility that could happen for the Bills?
My thoughts are, I hope it happens purely because the wide receiver 2 and 3 in this class have remarkably convenient names for great slogans. You know, Buffalo is known as the city of good neighbors. And if you don't get neighbors, you end up with where the Buffaloes roam. I mean, come on. It's too good. You got to get one of those guys on those teams just for the bit. But no, seriously, I think no, the Titans would not do that. I talked a little bit about it with Mike Herndon in the video we're about to show, the segment we have coming up. But to me, if you do that, you better have your Monty Awesomefort hat on, because you need to get your butt back up. You can't go down to 28, drop 21 spots and expect to walk out of the draft with, I mean, you'd get a future first out of it and more, I'd imagine, in that draft trade. You better, or else you really got screwed. But you're going to walk out of the draft with like offensive tackle 7 and wide receiver 14, or like, you know what I mean? Like it gets weird. Or are you satisfied with Tyler Guyton, Chris Braswell, and Malik Washington as your draft haul? No, not really. I would like somebody better than that in the tackle department. So yeah, man, I think that's not something that, and look, the Bills, I don't think that they are in that kind of headspace. I think folks are doing it because they're just like they want to see a dude with Josh Allen. I think that they're looking at what Kansas City did last year, seeing an elite quarterback elevate the just regular old dudes around him, saying we need Josh Allen to do that. We need to focus on building back up our defense, building up the meat and potatoes of our team, because we keep getting, it's not like they keep getting to the playoffs and being a receiver away. They keep getting to the playoffs and getting screwed because their defense can't stop anybody. And by anybody, I mean Patrick Mahomes. So yeah, man, I think that's something where they're going to stick at 28 or maybe move up a couple, but not with the Titans. Okay, we are pressed for time, so let's move right on, JT. One quick note on the Ljarius Sneed contract, which came out. This was also yesterday. Wow, yesterday was a big day. Ljarius Sneed's contract comes out, and what was originally reported to be a 4-year deal that had $55 million worth of total guarantees ends up functionally being a 2-year, $44 million deal. Just a little bit more than 2 years on the franchise tag. Banger deal for the Titans, in my opinion. Not an overpay in the slightest for a guy who you can move on from, again, for essentially the price of 2 consecutive franchise tags of a cornerback with a little bit sprinkled on top after 2 years. I think it's just the latest example of why you never listen to the original. If the original contract smells a little fishy, it's probably a little fishy. And there were some folks that had to eat crow yesterday over this.
Yeah, I think we all knew, especially after the big one for me, and why I am a non-believer in the first numbers that we get, is the same thing that happened with the Jerry Jeudy contract, where he also was guaranteed around $50 million something dollars.
Yep.
And then that was about $11 or $12 less than it was originally reported. So I think all of us have learned a big lesson in.
How about that Chase Young contract? $13 million guaranteed, and it's actually like $6. Yeah,
but it's a great deal, I think, for everyone. When Ljarius Sneed was talking about how he may have not gotten the big money that resets the market, quote unquote, but it takes care of him. You can see the proof is in the pudding right there, and it's that he's still getting paid at the premium of this position.
He's getting at least $22 million a year for the next 2 years. Yeah, he's doing very well for himself. He's being paid very highly for a cornerback, but he didn't reset the market really in any way. Okay, so we needed to mention that. We now have our last segment before we get to the top 10 tight ends in the 2024 NFL draft. So, had Mike Herndon on, talked about the cult of Joe Alt. I would explain what this is about to be, but I'm pretty sure I explained it at the beginning of this video. So, without further ado, JT, Mike Herndon. All right, I'm joined by a friend of the show, Mike Herndon. Mike, I had to get you in here. First of all, welcome back to the show. It's been a while. How are you? Good to see you.
Yeah, doing good. I'm happy to be on here with you.
We're going to spend like 10, 15 minutes just doing a segment on the cult of Joe Alt. And I hate that we're being put in this position. The idea to even get together and record this is born of having kind of fought this battle on Twitter yesterday, and then you put it in a whole article on PK.com. And then you posted it like at the same time that I was tweeting about it. And then we texted each other, and it just, I was like, let's talk about this, but get it on the record somewhere. So that's where we're doing it. And I despise being put in this position in the first place, because I want to start by making it exorbitantly clear. I think Joe Alt's the best tackle in this class. I like Joe Alt a lot. I think that he is absolutely worthy of a top 10 pick. I think that if you had to draft a tackle at 7 and it was up to me, I would take Joe Alt.
Same. Yeah, same.
However,
exact same thing. He is my 4th favorite non-quarterback in this draft class.
There you
out
go.
Of every player, out of every position. 4th favorite. I love him. But
yes, fantastic prospect. However, we're jumping the shark on this, and this is just peak draft conversation, because every year, the idea of like relative terms becomes such a big thing during draft season, because if you are higher or lower than consensus on a player, then you are high or low on them according to the people. And that's just not true, right? Like, you can think somebody is a first round pick, but just because you have them as your tackle 4 instead of the tackle 1, suddenly you're like, you hate this guy, which isn't true. It's just relative to everybody else. And this year's tackle class is so talented. There are arguably 6 guys that are worthy of first round grades, and kind of all in that upper tier And a lot of them are going to go in the top 20, if not all of them. And you're seeing a lot in Titan circles. People kind of make like kind of a kingmaker tendency, I think, with Joe Alt, where there's this natural human urge to hero worship the guy at the top of the pyramid. There needs to be somebody who we grade everybody else at the position against. And that person has become Joe Alt. And because of that, in people's minds, this gap between Joe Alt and the field has grown to the point of, I think, being really unrealistic. And you talked about this in your article on paulkaharski.com yesterday. So I want to give you this prompt and let you run with it. There was somebody that tweeted at me and I couldn't help myself but to quote tweet it. And it was, they said, I would much rather have Joe Alt at 7 than Olu Fashanu in a trade back and add a 3rd round pick. And I think that's just bonkers for a lot of reasons we're about to run through. But you essentially said the exact same thing in your elevator pitch for the opposite in your article at PK.
Yeah, exactly. I think a couple things here. So first, let me start with, if the Titans were a totally different football team, let's say they were, I don't know, say the Lions or a team that was like one player, like really, really close to being Super Bowl contenders, the Ravens, somebody in that realm,
right?
The last 4 teams left last year. And they were presented with the same question. I might have a different answer, because
yes,
at that point you are trying to plug one hole and you want to take the sure thing and you want to just go, try to push this thing over the hump. I might have a different answer for those teams, but for the Titans, where they are, I've talked ad nauseum about this team has 0 young players that you feel great about right now on the roster. I think, people are right to feel optimistic about Peter Skoronski. I think there's reasons to have optimism about Roger McCreary, Will Levis, Tajay Spears,
right?
Even Chig Okonkwo, if you wanna still hold on to some hope there. I think that's valid. But none of those guys are superstars right now. Now they may become superstars, maybe 1 or 2 of them. I don't know. Nobody's shown clear signs of that yet. Like, there's not a Justin Jefferson who's come in and like blown the doors off immediately and is like, okay, this guy is a Pro Bowler, All Pro for the next 10 years. Like, nobody's come in and done that yet. And you need, like, young talent is the lifeblood of an organization. They're on cheap contracts. They are guys that are growing in your system, that are going to be here for a while. That is how you build a good, solid foundation for a franchise. Titans just don't have a solid foundation at virtually any position. So they need bodies. They need guys in here. And I think we run into this thing, and this is where I'm at with the Alt deal. I love Alt, as we talked about up top. There's like no holes in his game. And I get why people are obsessed with him to some degree, that like, look, he's humongous. Check. His arms are long as shit. Check. He's powerful. Check. He's a good run blocker. Check. He's got great technique and pass pro. Check. Everything. He checks every single box. I get it. That's why I'm so high on him myself. And I don't want to be in this position of like saying, but JC Latham, Olu Fashanu, and probably Talise Fuanga, if you imported them into last year's draft class, they'd probably be tackle 1, right? I think all 3 of those guys would probably be tackle 1 last year. And if you put them in the year before that, I think they'd probably be tackle 1 in that class too. So that's why I'm talking about like the gap between Alt and Fashanu, especially to me. At the end of the season, it was like 1A, 1B, right? Like, it was like, okay, they're about the same. They're really good.
A lot of the actual like in the fall, it was Fashanu's the clear 1. Like, it was Alt was the afterthought, and that has flipped now. And I don't think anyone's provided a super clear answer as to why, but that's where we're at.
Some people have become obsessed with hand size now, even though, Paul Kaharski talked to people, other players, former Titans on the record about, hey, how much does hand size matter? And like, most of them said doesn't really matter at all.
Kenny Pickett of the offensive line.
And by the way, he dominated in college with those tiny hands for, his entire career there. So I think it's become this ridiculous thing of like that there's this huge chasm between Alt and Fashanu that I'm like, just doesn't exist in my mind. And so if you're going to present me with the choice of like, you get a really good tackle at 7, and then you have to pick at 38 or maybe trade back, but you have to trade back a lot further in the second to get another, day 2 pick out of it than you do,
Right.
In the first, because obviously those picks are worth more. If you give me the choice between I get a really good tackle at 7 or I get a really good tackle and I get another top 100 pick that I can use at another position that's desperate for investment, like edge rusher, inside linebacker, safety, defensive line, wide receiver, any of these spots, I'm going to take the 2 guys, because I also think we do this thing where we convince ourselves year after year that we know better, that
Yes.
this is,
Yes.
we know that this guy is the best tackle prospect. We know that, and you go back to like Jerry Judy's draft class. We know that Jerry Judy and Henry Ruggs and who was the other one? CeeDee Lamb are the top 3 wide receivers. Guess what? None of them are. Justin Jefferson was the best of that
Right.
bunch. Not one person had Justin Jefferson as wide receiver 1 in that class. I think we just way overestimate our ability to correctly rank 21 and 22-year-old young men who are transitioning from the college game to the pro game as exactly how they're going to perform at the NFL level, regardless of where they end up. And I just think trading down is a reflection of acknowledging that we're not good at this. We're not good at, which is a tough thing for a team to do. That's a tough thing for them to admit, right? Because they're paid to be good at this.
Right.
But history tells us that they're not.
Yeah, so a couple of things, and you make the most important point there at the end. So I'm going to save that for last. First of all, I love that you're recognizing the stage of team building that this team is in. I wrote my mock draft 1.0 over at Broadway Sports Media earlier this week, and talking about the Cardinals at 4, for example, where Monty Austin last year, very committed to trading back, valuing capital, valuing dart throws, valuing quantity over quality, because that was where they were as a team. And this year they're going to kind of be faced with that choice again at 4. At some point in your team building cycle, you have to flip the switch back over to quality, looking for cornerstone pieces. And so, do they take Marvin at 4? Do they trade back and look for more dart throws? Eventually you have to make that decision. For the Titans, I don't think, obviously they're not in the dire straits the Cardinals were in as a team, as a roster right now, but it is a situation where, like you said, they have a lot of holes, both in terms of starting and depth needs on their roster, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And they aren't flush with draft capital, like even the Cardinals were then at the time. And so that's a very important piece of it. You also bring up people being too certain of themselves. That's the number one thing that I think people do not realize, do not recognize. Well, let me start with this, actually. The chasm you mentioned, people convincing themselves that there's this big gaping hole between alt and everybody who is paid to analyze the draft. Everybody that is a professional when it comes to draft analysis has alt as their tackle 1. I have seen this ad nauseum from folks. It's not true.
Right.
There are, Greg Cosell does not have Joe Alt as his top tackle. Chris Sims does not have Joe Alt as his top tackle.
Lance Zierlein, whose father was an NFL offensive line coach. I mean, he's one of the guys that I
graded significantly higher than Joe Alt. Yes, 100%. Exactly. So that part's not true. And then even it's true that I'd say the majority of draft analysts believe he is the number 1 guy. It is by a razor thin margin. This is not Joe Alt's number 5 on everybody's big board, and then the next best tackle at 19. They are all it's 7, 9, 13, 14, 17. That's what these top tackles are. And the main point that I want to get around to and dwell on for a moment is like you say, that we convince ourselves every year we are better at differentiating between prospects than we are. And from a historical and analytical standpoint, fans and media and teams alike are not good at embracing the uncertainty of the draft, embracing the uncertainty of nurture versus nature. Just because you think you may have identified the better prospect, he ultimately may not be the best fit for you in your situation. He may ultimately be the best prospect in that draft, but he ends up not being the best player because he goes to your shitty team instead of going to a better team that tackle 2 goes to, and suddenly he turns into a franchise 10-year stud, all pros and all these things, and you're a bust. So all of that has to be taken into account. And there's an element of humility that I think most NFL teams, but maybe not most, but many NFL teams recognize, where if you're uncertain about two guys and you get the chance to value capital over your own self-certainty, you make that decision. Like, I know early on in the draft process, a lot of really smart folks I heard talking about when it was uncertain whether or not the Bears would want to go with Caleb or Drake May. And that was still kind of a discussion. Something that I heard that I liked was, if you're the Bears and you're offered just a king's ransom for that pick, I think to move down to 2 with Washington, for example, valuing the dart throws and embracing the uncertainty, admitting to yourself, you don't have the ability to differentiate between two very like candidates very well. That's the better, I guess, more efficient process than being self-certain and trusting your gut and betting on yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I mean, one of the big pieces of the discourse yesterday on Twitter was the Julio Jones trade. And it's because it was brought up as a comparable to what the Bills potentially could look to do after trading Stephon Diggs, trying to move all the way up to get one of these stud receivers, Harrison, Adunze, and Neighbors. But that was thrown out there. And then immediately, I put out the thing of, this is kind of what that draft haul would look like. Would you do it? And even I'm like, I don't know if I would drop that far, because you're getting way down, like, to where you're going to be looking at like tackle 7 or 8 in this class.
You need to come back up, I think, to be able to
I think so. Yeah. I think you'd have to move down and then go back up and hope, maybe you can hang on to that future 1 or something like that. But then, my mentions turned into this whole thing of, but look at what the Browns got. Well, look at who they drafted and all that, which is fine. It doesn't always work out. Like, it doesn't always work out. Sometimes you do end up with a crappy return like the Browns got. But look, the Browns drafted horrible for years, whether they traded back or not.
Notoriously bad at drafting team. And also, this is going to blow your mind, not every top 10 wide receiver pick in the draft is Julio Jones. In fact, most of them are not.
Exactly. Sometimes they're Kevin White. Sure.
Yeah, 100%.
One of those things. And if you look at, I think I've been sharing like a study from Bruin Analytics that has looked at this. They looked at it, I think, from like 2011 to 2019, trading up or down, like basically looking at both sides of trades in the first round for teams trading up, teams trading back, who's getting more value. And they looked at it a few different ways, whether first year value, second year value, third year value. They're looking at it from a standpoint of like, do you get the blue chip guy? And honestly, almost every single thing in that study favored the team that traded back on the whole, right?
Really?
Like, there's going to be individual situations you can point to anecdotally that say, yes, the team that traded up won that one. The Falcons won that trade up with the Browns, zero doubt about it. But that's not always going to be the case. So the majority of those cases favor the team that traded down. And I think almost every study that has looked at that has found that teams that trade down tend to do better on the whole than teams that trade up. And it's just because you're getting more dart throws at a process that, like, look, go back and look at any first round of any draft going back the last 10 years and look at how many guys were complete busts out of that first round. It's going to be like half. It's going to be like half. So you're looking at a really good chance that whoever you take first, and these are all guys mostly that everyone thought was a top 30 prospect, that everyone thought was going to be like, oh man, this guy is a really good prospect. And they don't work out. Sometimes stuff happens, whether it's injury, whether it's bad fit, but whether it's a guy that, just wanted to get that one payday and then, shut it down after that. Things happen, but I think we way overestimate our ability. And we also overestimate how much of a consensus team boards look like when they go into the draft, because I think everyone's sitting there going, well, whoever takes the first tackle is going to take Alt. I don't think that that's true at all. I think there's going to be teams that have Fuanga or Latham or Fashanu over Alt. And if that happens to be the Chargers or like say you traded back with the Jets, if the Jets wanted to take a tackle and they happen to be big Latham guys or whatever, there's a chance that Alt does end up being the second or
Alt
third
might
tackle.
not be at the top of the Titans board.
Yeah, he might not.
Who confirmed that already, that he's at the top of the Titans board? We don't know that.
Exactly. And I mean, even just looking stylistically, like I know a lot of people are like, well, the Chargers are going to take Alt. The Chargers I mean, they could, but JC Latham is really a hardball guy.
That's where I'm at as well.
Yeah. He fits them to a T. Is a right tackle already, you know, that you don't have to switch sides, which doesn't always work, that whole thing. So, yeah, we way overestimate a lot of things that we consider certain about the draft process that are just not certain at all this time of year.
All right. So in summary, number 1, we love Joe Alt. He's the best tackle in this class. I think he'd be a great pick at number 7.
Yes.
Number 2, where the Titans are in their team building cycle matters a ton to this conversation. Number 3, not everybody in the world has Joe Alt as their number 1 tackle in this class. And number 4, on a micro scale in the draft, it is good, efficient process to value capital over your own self-certainty when it comes to differentiating between prospects. Does that about sum it up?
I think so. I think
All
think that covers it.
Mike, thank you for joining me for just a little decompression session here. It's been good talking to you. We'll have you on for a full show sometime in the near future, but until then, thanks, my friend.
Absolutely. Loved it.
All right. Loved having Mike Herndon on there, and I think that was some really good stuff. Hope you guys appreciated that. Just a couple of comments in there. I see Braden is hanging out. Braden, I know I owe you something. The show started, and I'll get that to you as soon as that's over. Who's this Chris Herndon fellow? Yeah, we just found him. He's pretty good at this, and he knows what he's talking about, so we figured we'd have him on the show. James Neeson, the couple comments. I don't quite think you're understanding here. He's saying Alt will be the first tackle taken. Probably. I think, like, I'd say the odds are he's the first tackle taken. But to your point here, are we saying Caleb Williams won't be QB1? It's not. Caleb Williams will be quarterback 1. Joe Alt will be the first tackle. Those two things don't have even remotely the same level of certainty. Caleb Williams is for sure going like that. That's the difference here, is that there's a level of uncertainty with Joe Alton. A good point made by Mike Herndon on Twitter a couple minutes ago. Bringing this back up, JT, I know you remember this from the Combine. There was a poll of NFL scouts within the last month asking them who their top-ranked tackles were. And the results were 3 votes for Fuaga, 2 votes for Alt, 2 for Fashanu, and 1 for Mims. That's not even close to a unison. I can guarantee you there are some teams that will not have Alt as their top guy. Do the Titans have Alt as their top guy? I think they probably do. And Braden in the comments saying Titans have Alt as the top tackle and will trade back if he goes to LAC at 5. I think, again, I'm not sitting here saying that they won't. I think that's likely, but there is an element of uncertainty to it that I think people are just over their skis being so certain of the reality here that Joe Alt is the number 1 tackle for all 32 teams. He's the number 1 tackle for the Titans, and no matter what, you get him at 7 or else you screwed up. That's the general gist of this, JT. Did you have anything to add to that conversation?
No, I think with these things, I keep it to my chest, and it's something that
it can't be wrong if you never say anything. Right.
Exactly. I love to eat my popcorn. I love to sit back and eat the popcorn while I am believing that Kingsley Suamate's tackle number 1, but I'll never tell anybody that, that kind of thing. That's something right. I will.
But then when you're right, you can't take a victory lap. That's the issue, right?
That's fine with me. I don't have to,
So no, actually, you've done it the right way. You jokingly float it, but then you can go back and clip what you just said and cut the context out and make it seem like you said it for real. And then
running back Puka Nakua, baby. It's
right,
the same thing, right?
100%, 100%. What we have up next, I do not know. We've got a number of guests lined up. We'll have Austin Gale from The Ringer on with us for our second annual wide receiver edition of this episode, which, if you are curious, that's on April 11th. So not this upcoming Thursday, but the next. We're going to be doing our QB episode with Sean McAvoy, QB coach to the stars. We've had him on the show many a time. And I was texting with him yesterday. He's been working out a lot with Malik Willis and Will Levis together this offseason. Has some thoughts and updates from those guys straight from their mouths to Sean's ears and then to our ears. So excited to talk to him about those guys. We've got our boy Stoney in the house again for a second year of our interior offensive line episode and our offensive tackle episode. And then a couple other guests that we're still working out. Our people are talking to their people. We're figuring it out. But all of those positions coming up, as well as a handful of fun draft games, draft segments that are interesting ways for us to talk about some of the best players in this draft and some of the value adds that you can have on day 3, as well as, mock draft 2.0, mock draft 3.0 coming up until we get to draft night, which we haven't even mentioned on the show, JT. If folks are wondering, we are planning on once again doing our live draft shows on night 1 and night 2, day 1, day 2 of the draft on that Thursday and Friday. We'll be live. JT and I will be from somewhere. We'll pick a location, but we'll be together and we'll be, cracking a cold drink and having a good time and reacting live to what should be a really exciting draft. So stoked for the next 3.5-ish weeks of our lives. You and I will be back on our Sunday episode. We're back to at least 3 episodes a week, folks, from here through to the draft. So Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays, those afternoons are the live shows. We're also probably going to pack in some Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday shows somewhere along the lines as well. Stoney's saying day 3 zombie marathon pod also in the works. We'll let you know what that may look like, but that may also be a thing. So we will see a lot of awesome content. Make sure you're plugged in with us, following us at Hot Read Pod on TikTok, on Twitter, on Instagram. Make sure you're subscribing to the Hot Read Podcast on YouTube, Broadway Sports Media on YouTube, and the 440 Sports channel on YouTube. Those 2 channels are where you can find us. I think that's it, JT. I think we'll talk to them on Sunday, talking about a new position group. Until then, for producer JT, I'm your host, Easton Freeze. This has been the Hot Read Podcast. We'll talk to you later.